All right, hey guys, and welcome to the review for Unit 1 of our sociology, so our theories and our research methods. And so I wanted to cover some of the major points of our unit and hopefully do a little refresher for you so your retake is a little bit more successful. So to get started, our first one is called functionalism or structure function. Um, and this has the idea that really important pieces all have to kind of work together for a unified whole. So the big goal here is cultural stability, and we'll have things like religious faith or education or family or the economy or rituals, so kind of the habits of a society, all have to kind of be working in play for things to continue to be stable. So we use the example of Jenga, right? And as you pull those kind of blocks, society might be a little unstable. And so structure function, so a structure, these are all big structures in society. And we talked about functions. There are manifest functions in education, so like the bells or like having to complete certain classes. And these are all intended functions to work with the structure of education in our society. Latent functions are unintended consequences of having a structure in society. So we use the example of finding romantic interests in someone in school. School is not designed for you to find romance, but it happens. And so that is a part of the structure of school. And last but not least, we could have dysfunctions. So if Perrysburg got so big that there were long lines for everything and people didn't know your name and we couldn't really keep track of people and students fell through the cracks and we just got lost in kind of the system, that would be dysfunctional. And so those things exist all in structure function. Our next theory is what's called social conflict theory, but basically that there is a bunch of conflict in society. So whether it's the cops keeping back people who are protesting, or it's the competition or conflict between the rich and the poor, or different ethnic groups. So like the civil rights movement might be a good example of social conflict because it's a thing that produces change, that society changes as a result of having some sort of conflict or competition in between two groups in society. So social conflict people are often going to focus in on the inequalities in society, right? Maybe the system is rigged and these guys all have good paying jobs and their life is fairly good, and maybe these protesters don't have such a good life and their life is very unequal. And so if we looked at the difference between the bottom and the top 1% of people in America, there's a vast disparity, and social conflict people would talk about issues of race or geography or how education is unequal. So they would find all sorts of examples to highlight, and they're pushing for a change they desire. So our next one is symbolic interactionism, and this is the idea that you could take a series of symbols, so everyday sort of stuff, and that we really make sense of the world around us using symbols. So we got our cartoon here, right, and two girls are just saying hi, but they're doing a lot more than just saying hi. Now this is fairly stereotypical, it's supposed to be kind of a joke, but what sort of jewelry do you wear? Or what's up with the belt key, right? And cuffs, right? And checking out the shoes, right? And so they're looking at all of these kind of different items to kind of sum up each one another, or kind of figure out what where they stand in comparison to one another. In class, we use the example of the chairs, right? That there's beach chairs, and there's rocking chairs, and that there's table chairs. And so if that is the case, they're all chairs, but they all have different meanings because they all have at least different locations, at least in our perceived understanding. So, then they go on to kind of make fun of the guys, right? That guys have very little unspoken communication, that they just say hi and that's it. And our last major theory is the feminist theory, and this is the idea that gender is a huge divide in our society from the time of birth to the time of death, that men and women are treated vastly different in society, and so feminist goal is for increasing equality to happen between genders, right? And so Rosie the Riveter is kind of a famous 1940s example of that women can work in factories and do stuff that men can do, and so they want to see the decrease of barriers and boundaries around what are culturally acceptable for women to do. So, for example, right, a woman become a lawyer and represent women in that sort of a way. All right, and so our next real segment of the unit was research, and that sociologists are social scientists. They want to study why people groups are choosing to do what they do, but they want to get data on that, right? And so they'll use some different scientific methods to try to understand what's going on. And so we have quantitative, and this is the numbers sort of type of research, so something that can be quantified, meaning how many people out of how many people believe this thing in society. And qualitative here is the non-numerical, sort of the descriptive part of research. And so this is straight from our study guide, but I thought this was the most helpful. So surveys are questionnaires, right? Interviewing people. This is usually quantitative because you're looking for a number. And the advantages are these are fairly easy and cheap to do, and you can kind of get a broad feel for society if you have a pretty good sample size of a target population. And however, people might not fill it out, or they might misunderstand it. So our next one, secondary analysis, is looking at sources like the National Center for Education Statistics, or in class we looked at the Census Bureau map, right, and where's the best place to live and not live according to those 4 data sets. So usually this is pretty good because it's inexpensive and you can look at long-term data. So if we looked at those names, like in the beginning, our very first lesson, you could look at the trends of names over time and how those have maybe changed. So our first qualitative one down here is field research, and you simply go and watch or participate in people. So participant observation or field work is basically the same thing for our purposes, and so you're going to people watch. However, it's very difficult to quantify this, right? If you were going to go and watch college freshmen and their studying behaviors, how do you put that into some sort of numbers? So you have to describe it, and it might be biased based on the group you're just kind of picked. So moving on, we also talked about experiments. So this is a quantified type of research, so they're looking for some sort of number. So once again, students with low GPAs, what gets them to graduate, right? So this is usually can be replicated, right? But they're not always representative of a large population. How do you get people to behave in a lab setting in a natural sort of way? And I believe our last one is an interview, and this is where you simply ask people questions. And case study is when you look at a particular example to highlight a larger principle. Guys, I hope this was helpful. There is that study guide. There's some review stuff there. So I'll see you later.